All right, Tom. Great to be chatting with you, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's a real honor to be here. I've been a longtime fan of your podcast. You're one of my favorite podcasters. So I was actually trying to meet you or find you in Miami when I was there, but it was the place was so big that it was impossible to run into people. I actually don't think I've seen you. So I would have tried to come up and say hi, but yeah, another time, I guess.
Yeah, for sure, man. Miami was massive, and even just
Mm,
walking through the halls, like you're passing hundreds of people like a second. Like I
yeah.
remember just being like, you feel like you're drowning in the number of people that are just that were walking around in the different levels. But yeah, those things are awesome too, because you get to meet so many people like yourself, where
Mm,
both people that I've interviewed on the podcast and people that listen, you just get to have all those great conversations with Bitcoiners
yeah.
and they're always so great. I'm no longer surprised, but I am always grateful and amazed that, everyone's
Yeah.
so cool. Everyone's doing
You
awesome
always
stuff and people are respectful, and it's great.
Yeah, you always come back so energized, because I guess it's a lot different too. It's the energy is different when you're there in real life and just around Bitcoiners. But I don't know if you've ever been to any of the European ones like Honey Badger Riga, or I mean there was a more recent one in Amsterdam. But we went to a bunch of those, and I find that the smaller conferences or maybe meetups, I'm sure you've been to a bunch of those, are a bit more signal, and it's like Miami especially was, yeah, it was a great experience, but it was more like a festival than a kind of conference. So I just think that the smaller ones are a bit better. Like you can you can find your people easier, and yeah, but it was good. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I've actually never been to any of the smaller ones, and I know what you're saying. Like in the Miami one, the magnitude, it has a huge gravity, right? The magnitude is the spectacle, and that's why everyone
Mm,
goes there. And there's a
mm.
bajillion other peripheral events and private parties and all this stuff. And I can imagine the other ones you get a lot more one-on-one
Yeah,
FaceTime with people,
like
and
Riga, like Riga is almost like Bitcoiners take over the city, because the city's kind of small. So and there's not, I guess, normally during the week there isn't much going on. So wherever you go, if you're going to like a
you
steak
bump into
place or like a
people.
bar, it's just Bitcoiners everywhere. So
Yeah,
it's a bit of a different experience. But yeah, Miami was great too.
yeah. I mean, they also, Miami has a lot of how should I put it? Like, there's a lot of non-maximalist stuff going on,
That's what I was
because
trying to get. That's
right,
what I
right.
was
But
trying to get to.
you can't really, well, I mean, you can approach it many different ways, but I think to hit the scale that I guess they're trying to hit,
Mm,
you have to be a bit more so-called inclusive. And, as
hmm.
much as I don't like all that stuff, I would be lying if I said, again, like I didn't find the gravity and magnitude of the event kind of like cool from a spectacle standpoint. You get,
Definitely.
I don't know, it just it feels big. And then when you want that like more dialed in approach and the more like
Hmm.
hardcore Maximus stuff, you can go to
Yeah,
those
exactly.
smaller
Like Bitcoiners
conferences.
will find each other. I just need to do a better job next time of finding all of them. I've been to a bunch of the side events, but I guess not all of them. So next time I need to prepare and make sure exactly like what's happening, and try to get invited to those places. But yeah,
Well,
it's
tell me about what you're doing. I mean, we talked a little bit before we went live on some
yeah,
stuff that we're going to hit, but maybe first just to introduce everyone to you,
right.
like what kind
So
of work you up to.
so I'm Tom. My last name is Chojnacki. Might be hard to pronounce, but maybe you were wondering. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Satsback.com, which is a European-based Bitcoin rewards platform that helps people save in Bitcoin when they shop online, normally using fiat. So it's a twist on the quite popular, I would say, cashback business model, where people get some cash back for shopping online, or points, or stuff like that. And us as Bitcoiners, we just thought that it's obvious that Sats are the standard, and there's no better reward than Bitcoin. So we kind of upgraded that model with just paying out people Sats when they shop online using fiat. And we launched that in 2020. And it was, kind of a small project. I'm based in Poland, so I launched it initially here, focused on the major online stores here. and it got some traction. And then I think moving a year or into 21, I met this other great Bitcoiner from the Netherlands, Leon, who's now my co-founder and CTO. So we joined forces and we launched the current platform that you would see under satsback.com. There's a story behind the name to it as well. I thought I was a genius by trying to register the domain satsback.com. Just check, because like for me, is once I decided I want to do something in the rewards cashback space, just obviously with Bitcoin, I'm like, so isn't Satsback a thing? Like, let me check if the domain is taken, and it was available there for like $3. I'm like, oh my god,
Wow.
okay, this is it.
It's a
But then
sign.
the meme kind of happened, like it got picked up, I think, by Marty and Matt a few months later, when they said like Satsback is the Bitcoin cashback, right? Because it just makes sense since Sats are the standard. So we decided to rebrand the company to satsback.com, just not to hijack the meme. And it's, you know, it's a part of our story now. So it was like where we were kind of early in seeing that Sats are the loyalty points of the future. But I think more importantly, it was a way for me and my co-founder to get involved in Bitcoin full time. So we both had prior careers in things maybe unrelated to Bitcoin, but as we fell down the rabbit hole and Bitcoin started consuming us, we saw no option but to get involved full time, and this was a way for us to to give back, I would say, but as well as to to follow our intellectual curiosity and our passion, really, as it became. And yeah, but I think before I even launched Satsback, I knew I wanted to get involved, but there wasn't many around the year 2017, 18, there wasn't many Bitcoin only companies hiring, at least someone with like a business development background. Everyone wants developers. I'm not a coder. So this was a way to get involved and kind of push things forward and give back to Bitcoin, and maybe work on something I think we can all agree is quite important, which is accelerating adoption. And we think rewards are a great low friction way to experience Bitcoin, because I think that's the first step you need, right? You not everyone's lucky enough to have that Uncle Jim or a friend that can give them some sats for Christmas or for their wedding. So what we built is just an easy way, because everyone usually shops online nowadays for something, and everyone, at least in Europe, so we're still focused on the European markets for now, can find a store that they shop at and just stack some sats when they're doing it. And it's not much. It's usually like 3 to 5, sometimes 10 or 20%, but it does add up. And as the price of Bitcoin increases, those sats do matter. So we have a lot of passionate users that just try to use our service for everything they buy online, but as well as they tell us that it's a great way for newbies to get into Bitcoin, because maybe not everyone is ready to buy their first however much. It's a much harder sell to tell someone to convert some of their savings into something they don't really understand. And then there's this, what we identified as this chicken and egg problem of, people won't buy something they don't understand, but then how do they understand it without using it? So we think we feel like we're kind of solving that by letting people experience Lightning Network 2 for their first time before they actually go ahead and set up a DCA plan. One thing that could be, I know you're fascinated with Lightning Network. So we actually launched as a Lightning native startup. We never did on-chain withdrawals. We just launched with Lightning withdrawals, which was a way for us maybe to look ahead and try to save ourselves a headache with like potentially fees going up. But we also wanted to motivate our users to withdraw their sats as soon as possible. Like, I don't want to hold on to anyone's sats. So Lightning Network gave us this possibility to let people withdraw their sats without any like minimum amount. Like you don't have to get $5 or $10. You could actually get like 500 sats for your lunch from yesterday and withdraw them immediately to your Lightning wallet. Yeah, sorry. So I don't know if
Yeah,
that was good
I got
enough.
some questions. That's a
Yeah,
good
go ahead.
intro. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like a similar sort of model to like Lolly, Fold, and stuff like that
Yeah,
in the States, right?
yeah, right. So they're kind of different models. We would be more similar to the Lolly kind of model. And I don't try to hide the fact that we were inspired by both these companies. We just, as Europeans, didn't have something available for us. I actually reached out to Alex from Lolly's, hoping to see if before we launched Satsback, I was like, hey, maybe someone already built this and maybe I can help them expand to Europe. I didn't get a reply then. I did like a year later after we launched. So yeah, we just decided to build it, but it is a very similar model. We're not reinventing the wheel. But a similar model to Lolly, not Fold, because Fold works on gift cards, from what I understand, and it's more of an app. We don't have a mobile app yet. It's just a web app, just a website where you can get, find your stores and get redirected.
Are there many others in Europe doing the same thing?
There are a couple of smaller ones. I think we're the biggest one in terms of the amount of stores we have connected. So we have like an incredible amount of like above 15,000 stores connected at this time. And we're pretty transparent about how we source those offers. We don't go out and close these deals. In most cases, we don't close these partners directly. We connect to these large advertising networks that pay out a commission whenever someone buys something using their links. So yeah, there's a handful, but like one thing that's for sure is that the European market is underserved when it comes to these Bitcoin reward solutions. So like Strike, Lolly, Fold, they're not available here. And everyone's always like, when Europe,
Yeah.
we're a big market. But it's also like, I understand the reasons for why they're not here. And it could be because like the European market is not like United States, where the states are kind of connected and it's like one big market. It's still, even though we have the European Union, it's still very much fragmented in terms of like cultures and languages and even regulations. So it's kind of hard to enter Europe as you would say.
One of the things I really like
here.
about this model is, as you said, one, you don't have to understand the Bitcoin thesis in order to do it. You're just performing an action that you would do otherwise, and you're getting a reward, which you could just broadly say has a lot more usability than, standard reward points, because you're getting a form of money that's, applicable in many different circumstances. But what I think is probably going to be the case, or what I hope is going to be the case perhaps, is like, so people will do this and they'll have a Lightning wallet with Satsback and they'll accumulate tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of sats. And still, maybe this is in advance of them getting like the DCA approach or whatever. But what's cool is that more and more services are popping up that function on a SAT standard, let's say. So whether it's Hacker News or Fountain or, all sorts of apps and stuff are going to come online regarding content and other things that you can do that require a SATs balance to use, right? To like post, to upvote, to, to do whatever, to perform actions within the app. And they'll, like, this way of just going about their regular purchases will give them that initial balance to play with on all these services. And then then I think it's inevitable you have a light bulb moment. Like if you start using sats for all these different things, it starts to go off in your head like, wow, this is real. This is going to be a real thing. This is amazing. And as those apps and stuff improve, and as the experience is so much better as a result of that, sats or Bitcoin integration, then people will probably really start to be like, holy shit, I got to get my hands on as much of this as possible. And then they'll start, DCAing and saving and stuff.
Yeah. So we think like this is the future. We're just a bit early. Like
sure.
People haven't caught up yet, but that's one of the reasons why we feel or we like to think that we're doing something more than just a rewards platform where that, you know, helps you earn better rewards, because it's that network effect thesis where, you know, as more companies get on to the Lightning Network, the value of the network increases for everyone that uses it. So, you know, as Stacker News, Fountain, Podcasting 2.0 takes off, now our users with their sats, they can do a lot more things with their sats, and, you know, our service becomes more valuable to them because they can take their sats and you know, do all the things that, you know, mentioned they can do. But it's I think it's the power of the interoperability between these services, where, you know, you mentioned Fountain and Stacker News. I think they both use the Lightning address, and, you know, we were quite early to implement Lightning address withdrawals from our own platform. So if you're a user, you can just insert your Lightning address where you want to withdraw it to, where you want to withdraw your sats to, and you could actually input your Stacker News address there. And then whenever you get sats with us, they go into your Stacker News account, because I don't know, that's maybe what you're passionate about. That's where you spend most of your time. But we were able to do those things without any integration. And we can, like, even, you know, just like with Podcasting 2.0, we could, our user could decide that, you know, so this isn't live yet, but we want to implement this, that, you know, maybe your sats back from shopping online, you'd like them to go, maybe 20% of them to go to supporting open source developers, and then 20% maybe to your favorite podcaster. And then we could pretty easily do that. And you can't, that's just impossible with legacy financial rails. So
you mean you could input, you could do a split, you could input multiple addresses, right? Multiple Lightning addresses. And
right now you could only do one, and that's where all of your sats go to. So we want to do like a split, and let users decide, like, I want part of my sats to go here and part there. But yeah, but apart from helping people save and better money, where I hope that we're going to show people what's possible with Lightning, and just by being able to kind of integrate with these other services without even an integration being necessary. So, you know, I don't know if you know this platform called Gazer.fund. They do like crowdfunding in Bitcoin Lightning. And, you know, if there's a project that you feel passionate about, and, you know, maybe you think that you know, you don't need, I don't know, everyone needs more sats, but maybe let's say you've got enough saving in Bitcoin, and you really want to support, for example, for a month, you want to support this project that's doing great things for adoption and education, then you can donate your sats by just inserting their Lightning address into your account. And, you know, it might seem small now, but I think we're just, as you know, as you say very often, just scratching the surface on what's possible there. Like, you know, I think I've listened to all of your separate podcasts. The one you do for CT, you have some great guests there, and you know, you focus a lot on Lightning there, and it's just mind blowing how early we are and what's going to be possible with this streaming money idea, right?
I often relate it. I mean, this is not necessarily to the point of streaming money, but to the point of being early, like, you know, the faucet era, when you could go and get a few Bitcoin by just like clicking the faucet. I mean, even now, like, you know, podcasts can earn tens to hundreds of thousands of sats per episode, you know, if they're reasonably popular and they're on Podcasting 2.0. And those sats are going to be, if we're all right about this, way more valuable in the future than they are now. So there's that. And then it's the fact that, like, there's still only a few thousand people, you know, 10, 20,000 people listening to these podcasts. Like, you know, some of them are going to end up becoming very big, or there are very big podcasts out in the world right now. And the more and more people that are on the Lightning Network and are comfortable in using it and want to contribute in this way, and would prefer to operate on a value for value standard rather than all the other existing, you know, archaic price models, just think how that's going to revolutionize information and content creation, and, you know, just allowing people to engage in the creative action that they want to engage in, and not have any intermediary or you know, roadblocks or anything stopping them from doing that, you know, where it can just value can flow freely and the creation can stem from that. And again, like what are we, a year into podcasting 2.0, maybe a little bit more? I mean, it's so
Yeah.
early.
Imagine someone like someone like Joe Rogan, and now that everyone in the
Yeah.
States, I guess with the Cash app, everyone has access to the light. I mean, everyone, not everyone, but what is it, like
A
20
lot of
million
people.
users?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a lot of people use Cash App. It's a huge app, and they're all able to pay using Lightning and receive Lightning right now. I think,
Mhm.
most of them don't use it, but they're able to.
They
And if someone
will.
like Joe Rogan says like, hey, you guys can stream value to me or tip me, and then everyone's like, oh wait, I can do this on Cash App. Yeah, that's gonna be massive. But I'm really interested in like all these other use cases. Like I was just hearing about this startup, or maybe before we get into that, you mentioned faucets, and a funny story is, and we actually found this out recently, on one of these articles talking about the origins, or like why Satoshi moved away. And there was a quote, or there was a reply on the Bitcoiner Talk forum, where one of the early developers decided to build a faucet, and it was like you can get 5 Bitcoin when you just solve a CAPTCHA thing. And there was a donation address, so people could donate to the faucet just to distribute Bitcoin. And I can't remember the exact quote, but Satoshi replied that this was a great project, and if someone didn't build it, he would do it, because the way he said it is like, when it's going to be too hard for mere mortals to generate 50 Bitcoin, then they'll need this type of service. So I'm like, wow, did we really, like, are we doing Satoshi's work? But he did say it's an excellent first project. So so that was warming to hear that maybe Satoshi would have approved. But it's definitely important to get Bitcoin into the hands of as many people as possible, and I think as fast as possible, especially as especially as this, I don't know if clown world accelerates, but it seems almost like we've been warning people of what's happening for the past, I don't know how long. Like I don't know your background, but like I found Bitcoin through Austrian economics, and that was a good and a bad thing, because of the Austrians are also dismissed Bitcoin for too long, because they the regression theorem, and how Bitcoin can't be money because it wasn't used as something else before that. But so I was a gold bug before I found Bitcoin, and and that was before Bitcoin was invented, really, or discovered. But maybe 10 years before that. So we were talking about like, hey, hyperinflation is coming for the past 20 years, and everyone's like, no, there's no inflation. Like, look at this, we printed all this money, and then there's no inflation. Now finally we're seeing it. And people could say like, the broken clock is right at least twice a day. But I think it was okay. So maybe we weren't right about the timing, because the Austrians were always saying like, this can't go on. This is very bad. Like, you can't, even after the crisis in 2008, nothing was solved. We just swept it under the rug, and we knew that it's just kind of kicking the can down the road. And it's just, when it breaks, it's just going to be so much worse. So I think what we're doing here, and what you're doing with educating people about Bitcoin, is extremely important, especially in these times. So I'm convinced that the world has never needed Bitcoin more than it needs it today. I think that was a quote from Samson Mao, might have said that. It was on one of the posters in Lugano, but I think it's completely true, because I don't know if you see this too, but it seems like these things are accelerating in not the right direction. So like, I don't know, it might be difficult for people that don't have Bitcoin, but also don't know how to get it, that don't know how to use it as a tool to escape. And we hear of stories like this in Lebanon, in Turkey, in Venezuela, but it's almost like people think that it doesn't really relate to them, right? And until recently, because now these official inflation numbers, I don't know how much it is in the States. I think it's close to 10%,
Mm,
but I'm in Poland and here it's like close to 20%. And
wow.
people really feel it because it's like, and you know, that's the official rate. So it's actually not, it's actually a lot more if you're buying like steak or
Yeah.
whatever, like, you know.
Well,
So
let me ask you about that. And of course, I agree that, clown world is accelerating. And I think part of I was a gold bug before Bitcoin too, but I
mm,
think part of the oversimplicity of both mine and the typical, the standard Austrian or libertarian view was just that, all they would ever cry is like the monetary system is corrupt and doomed to fail, and there's going to be hyperinflation, so get some gold. And one,
mm,
that's not like a very cheerful or hopeful message that people can buy into, because you're basically saying there's going to be like, Armageddon, and you better have some gold. And like, people don't want, even if you make a logical case, people don't want to accept that, because it radically transforms your vision of the future and all that. So I think it was overly simplistic, and it was not a very positive message. Whereas, because as you said, they've been saying that for decades, really, if not a century at this point.
yeah,
And, it's only now showing up, but we may even go back into another period of extreme deflation, because
mm,
the dynamics of both the money printing and the debt system and there's a lot of complexity here. And I think perhaps had we had our time back, it would have been better to focus on all the different perversions, distortions, inequality, unfairness that this system was predicated on, the existing fiat system was predicated on, rather than just pinning, pinning all your so-called hopes as a contrarian or a libertarian on the fact that there's going to be hyperinflation someday. Because,
mm.
you could be wrong for 20, 30, 40 years, and they kind of
That's a good
were.
point. That's a good point, because
They're dealing
sorry.
in manipulated, as we both know, the CPI is manipulated, as you just said. I mean, 8%
Hmm.
official inflation, but a lot of people are feeling much worse than that, depending on, the staples that they have to buy and the energy costs and what's included and not included in the calculation. And so I think making the moral or ethical distinction, or having that discussion around how the architecture of how the existing system is architected, might have been a more palatable argument to make than simply the end is nigh, hyperinflation is coming, get your gold bars,
That's a
because
great point.
people weren't very receptive to that.
No, I
And
don't.
what's so great about Bitcoin, sorry, last point on that, is that it's such a hopeful message. It's not only saying, hey man,
Mm,
the system is incredibly fucked up, and it's going to get worse, and we should expect kind of chaos from here, but fear not, there's something to do about it. There's an exit that you can opt into, and it's super easy to do it. And that the more you do so, the more you'll insulate yourself from the chaos, and the more you'll predicate your behavior and your activities and your savings on a system that is ethical and that is moral and that will deliver to you a better future rather than a worse one, where things will become cheaper and cheaper over time. And that's something that everyone can buy into. And especially when they start seeing the fruits of that, they're seeing the people that have done that, and they're like, wow,
mm,
those people are happy
mm.
and satisfied and confident and hopeful and enthusiastic and energetic. Like, fuck yeah, everybody wants some of that juice. So, you move towards that. Nobody wants the Armageddon message and, better have some gold so you can buy some bread. I mean, who the fuck wants to buy into that?
Yeah, that was tough, and it was like, it was almost like they had no solution, because the gold system failed for
Well, that's the other
reasons that
thing.
we get into. But then they're kind of hopeful that we're going to go back and go
It'll be
back to
different this
this gold
time.
standard. But I actually think, and you touch on these. There's a couple of things here, but if they focused on like how the the so-called 2%, or how inflation affects people, as I can see right now, and just like relationships and societies, and it's not just prices going up. It has second order effects on societies, like as Safety goes into his book, and just affects our behavior all around. So yeah, maybe if the Austrians focus more on that. I mean, I guess they weren't wrong, right? They identified the root the root issue there with the money just being broken, that the money can't just be arbitrary and based on nothing. But sorry,
They
I
were
don't know what's
definitely
the next.
they were definitely right. They were just in a circumstance where there was no viable solution, so they defaulted to one that had already failed, which was the gold standard. So like, that's why
Yeah.
the whole libertarian shtick for so long was kind of sad and pathetic, even though I line up with a lot of them philosophically, but there was
Hmm.
just no like practical, viable solutions that, again, theoretically, they were very logical, but we're not really operating in a
Yeah.
super
Yeah. So I
logical world.
think,
And so the solutions fell short.
yeah. So sorry, John. So what I wanted to mention is, so I think that's why I grew up as a kind of angry kid, being just pissed off with the system,
Right.
because I was just like this rebel that I, questioned authority. I'm not gonna put up with this shit, and just and I didn't. Well, I understood why. Maybe I did. I came to understand more of why I was angry at the system, because it just wasn't, wasn't fair, and it wasn't something like as I understood it more. But the reason why I was angry is because I didn't see a solution. I was like,
Yeah.
before Bitcoin, it was almost like, oh my God, so this is it. I guess there's no way out of this mess. And once you start to understand Bitcoin, once you start to understand that this is the solution, it fills you up with hope. And like you're saying, you meet Bitcoiners, and um your your heart is like, yeah, you're just, because we do see, and even though we talk about like uh sometimes like doom and gloom, and especially when talking about economics, like it's probably getting worse before it gets better, but we do have that light at the end of the tunnel, where we think, that bright orange light, that we're confident that this is the solution. We might be
Mhm.
wrong, like I don't know.
And
I try.
you do need that, right? Because if you're looking out on the world and you don't see a bright spot and you don't see a way to resolve the existing problems, I mean, so many people are in that spot today, right? And that's why we see the political polarization. That's why we see diseases of despair like anxiety and depression. That's why we see so much substance abuse, because people are looking out in the world and saying like, how does this get turned around? I don't see any hope for myself. And if you can't resolve that, if you can't find the light, then you're going to give up and become nihilistic, or you're going to become depressed, or you're going to seek a way to distract yourself, whether it be through video games, drugs, alcohol,
Mm,
TV,
mm,
whatever. The fiat world is the way it is because it's constructed of the things that are trying to address that angst and that despair, just in an unhealthy or in an unproductive way. And I think a lot of us are figuring out that Bitcoin is the most viable solution on offer. And it seems to be the case that when you commit to a solution like that, uh, you don't require all of the fiat band-aids that have bubbled up as becoming the culture in trying to address all of those deficiencies, because they become resolved internally as a result of that hope, as a result of that striving towards something better in the future. And you begin to just reconstruct and reorient yourself internally
mhm.
to focus on that thing. And it's incredibly healthy on pretty much every scale that you could care to assess.
Yeah, for sure. But so the question is like, how do you get this message out? And I guess you're doing a great job with that, to the wider um, the wider mainstream kind of population, because like we're trying to do that too with our startup by just making Bitcoin more accessible to them. But I feel like we need to really step things up, because it's almost like we're running out of time before like all of these fiat currencies collapse against each other, or against the dollar first, and then the dollar collapses, and it's almost like we're getting like it's happening. Yes, that meme is it's happening.
Mhm.
And we're not going to be happy like just because we're right. Like it's not going to be fun to watch. Like I don't want to be like super rich and live in a place that's everyone's struggling. That's not why. Maybe that's also what makes us Bitcoiners different from crypto people. We just like we think about like how this affects the whole world rather than ourselves. Like we understand that this is bigger than us. Yeah, but it's
I don't think there's I mean, everyone has to answer that question for themselves, of course. I don't think there's one answer, but you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? And so
exactly.
there's in some sense, there's no amount of convincing or persuasion that's really going to work. So, it's always been my opinion that you just do your best to become the person that you think is most worthwhile of attempting to become, right? Be your best self, to put it in a kind of trite cliche sort of way. And you lead by example, be the change you want to see, whatever cliche, trope you want to input there. But I think it's true. And people will change as a result of observing the results of your approach in that way. And that's the most I've always felt that's the most powerful thing. Like I've had a million, whether it was, I remember in high school, like I was a strong advocate for weed, right? I thought it was crazy that it was illegal. I thought it had a bunch of benefits, and in high school, if I had a chance to write a persuasive essay, I'd write it on weed. And I'd speak to like my parents and my siblings and my friends about this issue. And I remember just getting like angry because I couldn't believe how they could think that, you should be thrown in a cage for, using a harmless plant in the privacy of your own home, doing no harm to others. And, I learned at the time that persuasion only goes so far. And there's no sense in getting like bent out of shape or upset if you can't persuade someone of your way of thinking. First of all, because you might not be right. And, so why go through all the trouble if in the end you're not actually right? But even if you are right, it's just not very effective. The most effective thing to do is to become the person you think is, is the most worthwhile to become. And if you really are oriented towards the thing that is most right or true or good, it'll become apparent to people that observe you that you're doing something right. And then they'll ask themselves, what is it they're doing right? How are they? The world is so crazy and chaotic right now. Why are they so calm? Why are they so hopeful about the future? Like all I'm seeing is political divide and horrible economic situations. Like how are they so cool with all this? And then they answer the question for themselves. And then they end up learning for themselves, and you don't have to do a damn thing other than do your best to pursue what you think is most meaningful. So I think that's the best way to handle it. And of course, you have to accept that you can't save everybody, right? Some people are going to just keep their heads in the mud, or they're going to be they're going to be in situations where it's really hard to do much about it. And I sympathize with them. But for the former group of people, they'll just be caught up in things more so than people that are able to exit. And that's just the way it is.
People don't have time, right?
Yeah.
People don't have time to study these things. I mean, the thing that I struggle with is that, we've spent probably thousands of hours trying to understand this thing. Like it's a hard concept to grasp. And, the rabbit hole is deep, right? And to even claim, like, I don't think any Bitcoiner claims he's an expert in Bitcoin, on Bitcoin, because just like the more you find out about it, the more you understand that there's just so much more to like like I said, the rabbit hole. But most people just are too busy with life. And, a product of this fiat system is that you need to work, as I think Michael Saylor said, exponentially harder for money that loses value exponentially. And you're not going to have time to sit down and read a book on, the history of, or like the Bitcoin standard or the monetary history or things like that. But I wonder, what do you think? Like, does it also require a certain type of person to? Because I think when you start to understand Bitcoin, it's almost like you have to admit that, or you admit to go back and admit that you actually don't know anything about money. And like the smarter you are, the more educated you are, or the more degrees you have, it's just much harder to do that because of maybe the sunk cost fallacy that, wait, I've invested so much in this education, and I think I know a lot, and I have these certificates here, and you're telling me that everything I know is wrong, so I'll just refuse that. No. And then it's because it does force us to go back to, like even kind of high school, kindergarten level of understanding of what money is. And I wish we were taught these things in school. And I sometimes wonder why we weren't, just these basic like fundamentals of what is money, what is good money. And yeah, I sometimes wonder about like the type of person. And in this case, maybe what I was trying to ask is, I heard that you spent some time in Asia or in China.
Mm.
or some years there. And I also like have like I spent a couple of years in Malaysia, but I also grew up in like the Middle East, and I sometimes think that maybe that helped me get this I don't know if personality or a certain way of looking at the world, and seeing these problems, or being able to identify these issues. I don't know if you ever thought about that, like or yeah,
Yeah,
just like,
totally, totally. I mean,
do these
there's,
experiences help?
yeah, there's many reasons why people would be resistant to, seeing the orange light, to understanding Bitcoin. And sure, like your degree of humility, because as we're finding out, the value lens that you see the world through goes a long way to constructing your worldview, because it's so instrumental there's so many, it's so consequential for how the world even looks, the type of money that's used. If you use a fiat money, like what are the institutions of governance and corporations and all that kind of stuff end up looking like as a result of that corruption that's embedded in the money and the ability to violate it, for example? And what does a society look like where each individual at basically zero cost can custody and secure their own money, and it cannot be manipulated and it cannot be corrupted? Well, what do institutions of banking and finance and governance and all the rest of it look like in that world? And it's very, very different. So if you're someone who's constructed a worldview based on, well, whatever, let's say your education and your credentials and the state of the world as it is, and you're, one, you're not very curious about how it could be different, and two, perhaps you don't even permit that things could be that dramatically different, then you're probably going to be pretty impervious to Bitcoin breaking through your consciousness and to letting it kind of hook you in and start that journey down the rabbit hole. But for people that are a little bit more open-minded to things generally, a little bit more curious to things, a little bit more humble, a little bit more critical of the way things are, and thinking that things can be different, or even desperate people that are like, surely something's got to give, something has to be different because this isn't working, then those people are going to be way more receptive to it. And good, because I want, selfishly, perhaps, I want the ones who are humble and curious and, have been disenfranchised in various ways to be the ones to get their hands on sats sooner, so that the people that are capitalized in the future are the curious ones, are the open-minded ones, are the humble ones, are the ones who saw or wanted a better world and were willing to take some risks to see it come about. That would be great if they had all the money in the future.
Yeah. I also don't get too excited when I hear like about institutional adoption, and when
No.
Tesla or Elon Musk are like, that's fine. They don't need to get it. Like, we can, like, we're also not in a rush to get to whatever price target that you have. Like, we know we're getting there. Is just, it's almost like the slower it takes, it's the better for everyone else. Like, I'd rather that it took us 5 or 10 years longer, and more people had time, and we built these tools that help onboard the people that need it most. So yeah, for sure.
And eventually,
sorry,
go ahead.
No, I just going back to a little bit more, like from my history, or from where I grew up. I just remember these massive lines of people lining up to send money using Western Union back home. Like, these are like immigrant workers, whether like maids or construction workers, lining up. And I saw these lines in these malls or in the streets, and I never realized that they're getting charged like 20 or 30% to send back like $100 a week, which was enough to support their family in Sri Lanka or wherever. And they're the ones, that I think need Bitcoin the most. And imagine like that type of saving for someone that doesn't make a lot is huge, right? They need it a lot more than Elon Musk or someone like that, right?
Yeah, totally. Which is why it's so cool, like what's happening in places like El Salvador, where, and I know a lot of hype and a lot of enthusiasm, during the announcement, and I'm sure a lot of that has petered out, and I suspect it'll take a lot longer for behavior to actually change on the ground, for people to become more familiar with it. But the punchline is at least they're becoming familiar with it, or at least they have many opportunities to do so. And 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, like they're accumulating sats. And what's really great, in the context of some big, financial catastrophe happening. And it may not, like, again, we've talked about already about how the Austrians and libertarians were all like, the end is nigh, this financial system can't, sustain itself. Well, here we are 50, 40, 30 years later, and it's still trucking along. Now, of course, the injustice is rampant, but here, it's still it's still alive. But if something like that should happen, I mean, how much of a advantage is it going to be in a place like El Salvador, where the infrastructure is already there for people to be like, oh shit, hyperinflation in the US dollar. And it's so much easier to shift on to another system because the infrastructure is there. There's been some momentum already. People are familiar with it, some education, some businesses. And I think that's going to be a massive, advantage, because if you don't have something like that, I mean, how chaotic will it be should a scenario like that befall a country or a region and not have an alternative? I mean, we've seen many examples throughout history, and we're seeing some of it now. Like, people are going to the bank with guns just to try to get their own money out, and people are
like,
losing
wow,
their savings overnight. It's crazy.
Yeah, that article from CNBC that just came out the other day was really good, because it really goes against that narrative of what's mostly in the mainstream, that this is just a speculative tool to, people trade this, and like, when's a good price to buy, and is it going lower, just the mainstream crap, where you have these perspectives that it's actually so much more than that. It's just it's a tool to escape these failing systems, as we've seen in Lebanon. Apparently their local currency lost like 95% of their value, and if you were into Bitcoin, maybe you didn't have too much. You at least knew how to move your money that you saw was increasingly falling in value relative to everything else. You at least had that escape hatch, or at least knew how to use it. And I think I like to think what we're doing with Satsback is in that case, in that sense, like your sats, like your 100 or 50,000 sats might not save you from like a hyperinflationary event, but you are going to learn how to handle your keys to your Blue wallet or your whatever Lightning wallet that you're using. And in the future, when you and you're gonna know that there's this parallel system that you could always move to, and you might be aware of that. There's ATMs, or there's people you can buy from, and yeah, these are just tools that people should become familiar with, because yeah, like we mentioned, it's I don't think it's ever been more important. And yeah, even though they might kick the can a little bit further down the road, like we were wrong before, like it might take another 5-10 years before the system collapses. It's still going to be immensely valuable to educate yourself about this.
Yeah, I still walk by, people going to MoneyGram and Western Union all the time, and I'm just like, the thought in my head is like, wow, they don't know. They don't know there's such a better alternative where they can save so much money, and it can be so much quicker, and you don't have to line up out in the hot sun for an hour to get into the office to, do all the fucking paperwork to put the transfer through. It's the information, disparity is extreme right now. And, but that's why it's so powerful when you finally get it, because, that gap just like closes almost in an instant. You're like, wow, as you said before, the world is totally different than I thought it was. The possibilities and the potential are totally different. So many of the issues that I was thinking were unresolvable are now, it's very easy to see how they can become resolved. And then, as you did with Satsback, all you really want to do is contribute to it. You want to step through into that. You want to step over the line yourself. You want to step into that realm, that deflationary realm, that more free realm. But then you also, you want to bring people along. You want to make it easier. You want to contribute in some capacity, both for your own benefit and for the benefit of everybody else. And that's why, so many Bitcoiners, like, they want to find ways to work in Bitcoin, because you get to hang out with like-minded people. You get to still stack sats. You get to contribute to the network in some way. And what could be better, and then you just, that's the way to do it.
One thing I have to say though, it's all that, but like I've come from like a traditional, maybe corporate industry, from the telecommunication space, but any industry would, the same things would apply. But within Bitcoin, and I'm sure this is something you've noticed, is that and people talk about this, people are just givers in general. People are so generous with their time, and that you could actually reach out to anyone. Like I replied to your tweet, and I'm sure there's a lot more interesting people you could be speaking to than me right now, but you took the time and you're like, yeah, sure, let's record something. And you see this with you could DM pretty much anyone, and I've always gotten a response from people that I imagined are very busy, and everyone's just willing to help without expecting anything in return, just because maybe they understand that you're also fighting the good fight. You're also a Bitcoiner, and we're all working towards a similar mission. And it's never been more like that surprises me till now, like how generous and how helpful everyone in this space is. It's really, there's I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Like everyone's just so generous.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And my experience has been the same throughout the years, and it is super cool. And I mean, often people would often say, like, part of the reason for that is once you get off that hamster wheel, once you develop a greater sense of security around your own future, then you're more willing to, devote your time to other people. And I think that's part of it. But I definitely think there's an ethic that kind of runs through it. And that's like, as you said, like if there's other people that you encounter on the road that are attempting to do, learn about Bitcoin or do something good for Bitcoin or be involved in some way, you help them out. That's the right thing to do. You give them the time, you do what you can within reason, of course. But I agree. It seems to pervade, a lot of people in this space. And it's just another one of those things that makes it such a pleasure and such a nicer place to operate in. And that's what I mean. Like I talk about this a lot, but people are going to follow their incentive ultimately, right? So even those hard-headed people that you referred to before that, can't imagine a different future and are very closed-minded and are very arrogant in whatever way, at some point, the price signal and their financial incentive will make them change, whatever that might be. So everyone's going to be caught up in that net eventually. But in advance of that, what I think is so cool, and conferences are places where you get a sense, you really get to feel this because, people gather in large numbers, but you get a sense for the cultural emergence that's happening around this stuff, and in how, people are changing their thinking about themselves and about the world and the different values and virtues that they're thinking more about and trying to integrate into their lives, and, the different behaviors or practices or pursuits that they're engaging in their personal life and their family and like all of that stuff. And I'm not here to say, definitively what any of those are, but just to say that like that kind of mix that's being passed around and that's bubbling up, I think that's what's going to attract a lot of people in advance of the necessity of adopting Bitcoin, because they're just going to look and say, do you want to be working in an environment where like to talk to somebody you want to talk to, or to talk to somebody, a so-called higher up, you've got to go through a million secretaries and you've got to block out a 15-minute time, and it's super like it's really precise and all that jazz? Or do you want to be in an environment where people are open to speaking and sharing ideas, and there's not a lot of this hierarchy bullshit, like the best ideas win, and you show up and if you're humble and you're genuine, then people are probably going to be very willing to give you time. And like, of course, most people are going to want to operate in an environment like that. The flip side is like, I think that causes you to level your game up as well, because if someone's going to give you their time, you don't want to bring, crap. You don't want to show up with crap. You want to make sure you're, you're signaling to them that you respect their time, and that, so you try to show up in your best form as well. And if everyone does that, then you get good relationships started, you get good work done, you get good ideas, passed around and refined. And that's, that among other things is what's so compelling about the space, is like that seems to be the rule rather than the exception.
Yeah, I think it could be also because us Bitcoiners, I think tend to see ourselves as this niche within a larger niche of crypto. And it's a, if for some people, I mean, for me, it was a journey to get to this Bitcoin only position. And as we meet other people that have been through that journey and have asked these difficult questions, and have reached to a similar point that we're in, we tend to understand each other without words, right? Because we tend to read the similar things, listen to similar podcasts, and it's almost like we're in sync without even having met each other. But another
I
thing
totally
that you
agree.
mentioned, yeah. So another thing that you mentioned was I really like this quote. I'm not sure who said it, but someone said that people will find Bitcoin either through curiosity or necessity. And like you mentioned with the price signal, like at some point you're gonna need to capitulate and say, okay, fine, I was wrong. I need to preserve my wealth into the future, and it's just you're gonna be worse off. But I think eventually, like apart from even like how early or late you are, like you could actually not have any Bitcoin, but you're gonna be better off in a Bitcoin denominated world, right? We understand that too. So it's that's another element there. But yeah, I just hope more people find it through curiosity.
Yeah, me too. I kind of touched on this a while back and forgot to pursue it, but what is it like in Poland right now? Like 20% official inflation. What are people thinking about what's going on? And like, is Bitcoin at all in the public consciousness as a potential solution? Or
the mainstream media has done a very good job at convincing people that this is like penny stock together with crypto, very risky investments, very volatile, and it doesn't make it easier for us. The price volatility, or at least coming back from the previous cycle when we went up to whatever 60 70K, and now we're down whatever it is 70%. I don't even follow the price too much, but it's people like, okay, people say like, fine, so inflation is so high, but then Bitcoin just dropped 70%, so did you tell people to buy it at 60? Where it's really hard to get into these things in like a few minute conversations, and most people still, at least in Poland, most people look at crypto as something to trade, and they see Bitcoin as something that's just like boring, and it's not too fun to trade because it doesn't go up or down, I don't know,
doesn't go up
too
100x
fast enough for them, or yeah, exactly.
In a week.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. There is a growing Bitcoin community here where we're trying to do our part to find these people by like having more meetups and stuff. But generally, of course, there's a group of Bitcoiners that and a growing group, I would imagine, for whom it's the solution. But for most people, it's just I mean, it's unfortunate, but I think a lot of people in Poland, older people, remember. So we didn't have a hyperinflation as bad as the Weimar Republic across the border, but there was a time when you were paying like 1 million zloty. So actually, the funny thing is, our currency is called zloty, which is the direct translation of golden. So you're paying with golden something, so like 100 golden, and I think a lot of people still think it's backed by gold just because of the name, and they don't think about these things, and they weren't taught it in school. But there was a time, I remember, I think early 90s or late 80s, where you had where there was too many zeros, so the government decided to take off the zeros. But I can only imagine how we got to that point was through very high inflation, and I'm sure a lot of people suffered because of that, couldn't save, and I don't know, maybe it's why my grandparents couldn't save enough. But I think the more immediate issue right now is like you said, rising cost of living for most people, especially people that are retired. There's a lot of retired people here now on their pensions, and the pensions aren't going up, but the prices of everything is. the price of energy, the cost to heat your home, a lot of these other things can be, I guess we can blame our incompetent government for like just making wrong decisions and not having enough coal. So I think that the immediate worry right now is like, how do you keep the house warm for the winter? Yeah, the energy issue is real, even though we've been kind of lucky to have like a relatively warm start of the winter past few weeks or months. People are worried if, you know, and especially because of the pipeline situation, we like there's a risk of not having enough gas, and we definitely don't have enough coal. So that's the worrying part, that people are not going to be able to warm their houses. And a lot of people can't afford to. It really breaks my heart to hear older people say that, you know, they have to decide whether they're gonna buy medicine or heat their house. And, you know, most people aren't going to make the connection here that this is because the money's broken. This isn't because of the war. They blame it on the war. They say it's all the Putin inflation, or it's a good scapegoat because a lot of it is because of the war. But we know as Bitcoiners that these problems were evident before the war and before COVID, right? People blame, before the war, people blame things on COVID, like this, you know, supply chain issues because of COVID. But we saw the cracks before then, and it's just people get distracted. And yeah, you know, but it's not just Poland. It's all of Europe. We're in unfortunate situation. You know, we're privileged enough to like pick up and travel, move to whatever country we choose, to like a warmer place. But I really worry about my neighbors here, fellow citizens
you know,
in Europe generally. Yeah.
One of the real tragedies with the, let's say, the unwind or the slow collapse of the system, or however you want to characterize it, is, as you said earlier, you know, you have to work harder and harder for less and less. And the effect of that is basically, as it gets worse, your time preference becomes higher and higher. You become more and more desperate for, you know, the things you need, the necessities of life, let's say. And that makes it harder and harder to adopt a solution that is predicated on basically a low time preference. You know, like I've said this before, or I've said it many times, like, and you know, a lot of people in the space have elucidated like why it is when you're put in that situation, you engage in activities that exacerbate it, because you want to get out of that situation more and more as it becomes more desperate. And so you look toward gambling or shitcoin casinos, or, you know, anything that, like, the quick fix. And as we know, the quick fix most often, like 99% of the time, is going to put you in a worse situation, not a better situation. And so as the problem gets worse and worse, the actual solution becomes less and less appealing, because the actual solution is, hey, you're not going to get out of this fast. But with every single day, if you really dial in your life, you know, find the places where you're, you know, consuming things you don't need, or find the extra hours in the day where you can work, or whatever, where you can every day just incrementally improve things, right? And in this case, I'm referring to, like, get your 12 words and start putting Satoshis on them just every day. And you won't get out quick, but a month from now, you'll be in a little bit better situation. And 6 months and 12 months and a year and 2 and 3, and slowly you'll crawl out of that cave. And with every step, you're going to feel a greater sense of calm, a greater sense of security. And that's the way out of this. But we live in fiat world where everyone wants a quick fix, and no one wants to hear about a 5-year plan.
They need the quick fix as well. Like if you don't know how you're going to heat your house for the winter, you're like more worried about that. Yeah, it's tough. You're right. And, you know, like you mentioned, I sometimes think like people don't have time to learn about Bitcoin because they need to work longer hours to just work harder just to pay the bills. And it's, you know, it's these second order effects of the fiat system that you know, we identify, but it's just frustrating that you know, others don't see it. It's kind of personal for me because my parents are like retirement age right now, and they managed to save some money, but it's all of these people, they're forced to speculate now, because what do you like?
Right.
Where do you keep your money? Are you
Exactly.
going to buy real estate that's been in a bubble for the past however long years? Or, and I don't think people, because my parents don't have like an economics financial background, they're specializing in something else. I don't, it's frustrating why everyone now needs to be economist, or needs to be up to date with the latest about like what the Fed is going to do, to just to be able to preserve their hard-earned savings into the future. And if you just make one wrong decision there, like buy the wrong bond, you're wiped out, and you could be like the hardest worker. You could have done everything right. It was like, this is actually a quote from it just stuck with me a few years ago, when the Lebanese, I guess they have the lira. In any case, there was a woman there said that, I did everything right. I went to school, I studied hard, I got a job, I saved money, and what do I have? Like all of a sudden, from one day to the next, I've got nothing, or my savings lost 70% of their value. And it's just tough.
It's fucking tragic, man. It's such a insane injustice that's been put on the world for so long. We will look back on this period and people will be in disbelief that it could have gone on for so long, and that so few people identified it and so few people stood up against it, even when there wasn't. I mean, now there's a real easy solution, which is Bitcoin. But even before, I mean, people will be in disbelief that people didn't rise up with their pitchforks and even in advance of a
Right.
viable solution like Bitcoin. But and that's why the first step, because you said the madness of having to go further and further out the risk curve to try to preserve your stored energy, your previously accumulated capital. And then, of course, as you go out on that risk curve, you risk losing it all. And as the regulatory environment becomes more fluid, you risk losing it all. And I mean, there's so many ways that it could all go extremely south, and you could lose it all. And that's whether it's through taxes or through mistakes or through taking too much risk, all that kind of stuff. So the first step is just to opt the fuck out of the madness. It's not even like, your wealth in Bitcoin is going to, this is what I meant by like the long-term approach. Your wealth in Bitcoin is not going to save you tomorrow just because you made that switch, but you will be able to say, no more. I will not be stolen from anymore. I'm not participating in this madness. I'm taking my freedom back. And from that initial action, I'll build up from there. And to the extent that you can siphon wealth into Bitcoin, or if you're just from that point on, you say, I'm not being stolen from, I'm free, and I'm going to store the fruits of my labor in Bitcoin, and that will save me if and that will be my salvation, basically. If I do that dutifully, then that's the greatest likelihood of extricating myself from this horrendous situation that I've been, put in, basically.
This idea is very powerful with time theft. I think about it a lot in terms of like, the only thing as scarce as Bitcoin is their time, and this is a way to protect ourselves from others robbing us of our hard work, time spent working, stored energy. But yeah, it's just hard to communicate these ideas to others, that inflation is theft. But people are starting to feel it now, and yeah, maybe will become easier, but we'll see.
Yeah, little by little. I mean, we all have to stay humble, patient, and not expect too much, right? You can only really control your own life, and we should all be doing that to the extent that we can. And then whatever contributions we make, we can't have too many expectations that they're going to resolve things as broadly or as quickly as we'd like them to, because it's just not realistic. But every passing day, I mean, you see how this ecosystem in this space is growing, and the type of people that are coming in, and the changes that are being affected by it all. I mean, I'd almost feel selfish if I was asking for more than that, because I'm so grateful that this solution exists, and that, I mean, it's 13 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, that's on the historical time scale,
It's
that's
nothing. It's a
not a
blip.
very long time. And look at what's been done in that short period of time. So
Mm.
I think we have to have a historical perspective on this rather than just, our own lifetime scale perspective. And with that perspective, things are going really damn fast and
Yeah.
great,
This also this also gives me makes me feel a bit more sure, because like, going back to the question, like, are we wrong or are we crazy? But seeing the people like Jeff Booth, Michael Saylor, or some of the most intelligent people I've ever heard speak, you being one of them, and we all feel the same way, and are saying the same things, is like, we can't all be crazy at the same time. Like, Michael Saylor was against Bitcoin initially as well, and then he's, I think he even studied how technologies change societies or economies. Like, he's a very deep thinker. Jeff Booth as well, like him with his book, The Price of Tomorrow. Like, some of the most intelligent people I've heard speak are on board, right? And they all kind of see this Bitcoin signal, and they also, what's reassuring is they get to a similar position that we're at, right? So they all have like their own journey, and I'm not sure if you had a similar one when it was first like, wow, this crypto thing, these blockchains, and seeing that some of the most intelligent people that you've ever met are also seeing things similarly. I don't think it's an echo bubble. I think it's a sign that there's something here, and that and I like to hear and speak to people that are generally opposed, and I actually I really enjoy those podcasts that bring on intelligent people that have arguments against why, maybe not the Peter Schiff type that just, it's just like,
yells.
you can't get through to him, but you have like intelligent people trying to criticize Bitcoin, and I really like listening to those, because I think it's important that we should sometimes check our biases, and nothing's guaranteed, but I think like we've thought these things through, and you guys have as well, and it's just really reassuring to see like more extremely intelligent people join us on this journey.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we all benefit from that the dialogue that's happening out in the open, right? Like, even if you take Jeff or Saylor, like, their rhetoric around this stuff has evolved since the time that they've been around here. And so all these ideas get thrown out and they get talked about on podcasts and they get mixed around on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. They get written into articles, and then all of our minds get upgraded. And then we kind of sort out, like we question it in our own minds, and we follow the discourse, or we engage in the discourse. And then it seems like together the hive mind is just getting more and more and more clarity around the truth of this thing. And that's wonderful. And as you say, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to just think something that isn't true, right? So that, I think that's why there's this kind of ethos of like really trying to poke holes in ideas in this space, and really being critical, and really being really representing your point of view to the point of almost like aggressiveness, which we sometimes see, but just to make sure that you're representing it as much as possible, so that whatever is the result of the discourse, you can have some confidence that both sides were represented as well as they could be. And so the idea that won out in that particular discourse has a greater, you can have more faith in it, has a greater gravity. And I love that, because we all get to move along together. And what's so great, I mean, you think about how much your perspective and your ideas and your philosophy, and perhaps, and how that's bled into your behavior and your life. I think a lot of people would probably admit that in the 2, 3, 4 years they've been involved in Bitcoin, a lot of change has occurred in that domain regarding their perspective and their ambitions for the future and their ideas. Add 5 more years to that, add 10 more years to that. I mean, it's really exciting just to know that. And a lot of us, I think, I certainly craved it when I was younger, and I wasn't receiving it in my in my social environments, but I wanted that degree of like discourse, and I wanted like that voracious truth discovery thing happening, and it just wasn't there because so few people really cared. And now that I find myself in an environment and, you know, amongst a group of people that really do care about that, and it's not just for the sake of it, it's directly oriented at a, you know, a pretty clear vision of the future. It's so enjoyable and rewarding. You know, it's just so great to be able to have that degree of intellectual stimulation. Like the tap is always there whenever you want to plug into it. And it's a huge blessing as far as I'm concerned that we have this massive, open, truthful, and truth-seeking discourse that's currently happening around this mechanism that's seems capable to have a dramatically positive impact on the world. You know, so what could be better?
At the same time, around the world, you know, across borders, like we're just
Yeah.
sharing these ideas. Yeah, it's incredible. I really like how you focus on these second order effects of how Bitcoin influences personalities and lives, much more than just financially, right? And you go into the philosophy of it and the psychology of it, and I really enjoy listening to those topics because I've experienced them myself. I've on my own life, you know, as I understood Bitcoin more, I witnessed my life change. You know, just simple things like being able to plan more for the future, or being able to think farther ahead and into the future. There's, like you said, you know, what about 5-10 years? What but then we start thinking about generations. We're thinking about, like, am I building generational wealth? Like, do I need this car? Do I need this watch? Do I need this, you know, what I thought I needed? Maybe I don't need any of those things, and I actually want to, I don't know, build a legacy or be remembered for something. It's a drastic change.
Totally. And I think
Yeah.
that's all kind of wrapped up in the notion of upgrading or refining your hierarchy of values, your sense of value, right? Like, what is it that you deem worthwhile to pursue? What is it that you deem worthwhile to exchange your limited resources, both time, energy, and capital, for? And it really seems like a lot of people are starting to say, well, it's not like the Lambo, and it's not just frivolous material stuff, and it's not just, you know, all of this stuff that the fiat world would tend to think is like the trappings of wealth and success. It seems to be other things. And what I find so fascinating about the discourse that we just referred to is that is what's being discussed as well. Like, okay, if you have a certain degree of security over the future and you're starting to think long term, what is most valuable to you? Because what's most valuable to you will dictate what you dedicate your limited resources to. And this bleeds into everything, not just your planning for the future, but like we were saying before, like even the values and virtues that you consider and how you want to try to embody them into your own life and into your own behavior. And it's the answers that are being conjured up as represented in people's actions, you know, because they're far more easy to observe than they are explicitly articulated, is really interesting. And this is why you said, like, when you go to a conference or something like that, you're already on a very similar wavelength with people. Like your values are already lined up. And of course, that makes it incredibly conducive to rapidly developing relationships and friendships and business partnerships and all the rest of it, because you're so aligned on values. And I think with every passing day, we're kind of gaining more clarity and making those values more explicit. And they, you know, a lot of them, as far as I can tell, seem to be things like truth and things like freedom, and, you know, and honesty and fairness, and, you know, and these are the values that seem to be orienting our notions of the future and how we orient our lives in order to get there. And it, you know, again, it's just another crazy phenomenon that, you know, magic internet money seems to be conjuring up.
You know what I also think it is, and I think Jordan Peterson goes into this, and you talk about this. I'm pretty sure you do. Is like that sense of having a purpose in life, that the higher meaning, you're working towards something that's larger than yourself. And I think that's something a lot of people miss nowadays, and maybe that's why, you know, all the addictions and stuff, that they just not, you know, maybe the idea of like God is dead and people aren't going to church anymore. That's also related there. But part of, since I was young, I was always like asking myself this question, like, what's the purpose? Like, why am I here? What's the goal of
It's
my
the
life?
meaning
Like,
of
what am
life.
I? What's the meaning? Like, why am I here? And I think the reason why Bitcoiners are so energetic and so optimistic is, I think I've, at least for me, I found maybe not the exact thing I need to do, but at least I found the solution to my own life. Like I found the answer to what do you want to be involved with for the rest of your life, and it's,
Mm.
maybe it's the people, but it's maybe it's that element of, I was always fascinated by these like hidden truths where, I've discovered something that seems like it's the answer, but nobody has heard of it yet. So that was the reason why the Austrian School of Economics was fascinating to me, because nobody heard about it. Like I went to an economics university, and you're not taught these things. You don't hear about like Mises or any of these thinkers. So that was fascinating. And then Bitcoin seems like the thing too, that is just like this secret hiding within this noise of crypto tokens. And we're just there early, but I think it's that purpose, that sense of that, we found our thing, that I was missing, that was maybe the source of my frustration and my kind of rebelliousness. And yeah, but I think there's an element to that as well, right?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people would resonate with that. And, in a sense, it's kind of obvious or natural, because if you think you've identified the thing that would be both most worthwhile in actualizing your own ambitions, as well as most worthwhile in improving or contributing to the positive development of the world, or most effective in doing that,
Mm,
how could you not really devote yourself to it? Because it ticks
mm,
both of the most important boxes: your own well-being and actualization and ambition, as well as that for everyone else. So it's almost like, it's
mhm.
almost at the extreme of what could possibly be a
Yeah,
motivating force, because
yeah,
it is the maximum end of two of perhaps the most meaningful
yeah.
considerations.
And maybe this the selfish need to be stimulated intellectually. What other subject could be more stimulating than Bitcoin, that's got all these elements that you could dive into and really spend years studying? It's, like we said, it's this never-ending rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You couldn't imagine something more intellectually stimulating than Bitcoin. And choose whichever element of it that you like, whether it's the technical side or the economic side, or yeah, it's I think that's a big part of it too. It's um I think you go into this in previous podcasts. You said you had like a previous career in maybe like a traditional industry. I don't know if it was like traditional finance or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
but I see this a lot, like with Bitcoiners I meet. So I've had similar. I spent 8 years in like a telecommunications industry, and it wasn't rewarding. Like it was high. The pay was good, and maybe it was golden handcuffs, because you're thinking
Right.
like, oh my god, I'm making good money. Like why should I look outside of where I am? Um, but
It's just a job.
it's
Wasn't meaningful,
yeah, it
right?
was a job. I mean, just a job, but yeah, it wasn't meaningful. Like there wasn't much more to it. So I think Bitcoiners tend to, or at least ones that have had this fiat job, once. So maybe I don't know this advice, but anyone, I wonder, like, should I have stayed there? I probably would have had much more Bitcoin if I just stayed in my fiat job and just mined fiat. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't have changed anything, like, because it's just so rewarding to be able to and be in Bitcoin full time and be building um, things that thousands of people find useful. Is Yeah, it's just super rewarding. I'm sure you feel the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a question that everyone has to come to on their own. Like, mine fiat so you can accumulate more Bitcoin. But again, as we discussed, this kind of how Bitcoin changes your engagement with your own system of value. You have to ask yourself, like, what is more valuable to me? Is it more valuable to me to be in a soul destroying job, but accumulate, 50% or 100% more sats a year, and the premise on the premise that, like, I'll have more wealth in the future to be able to, do what I want? Or is it more valuable to you to stack less, but be able to wake up every day and engage in work that you find most meaningful with people that you're aligned with? And who knows? I mean, you're making a lot of assumptions there. I mean, if you engage yourself in that way, where every day you're enthusiastic, energized, can't wait to get at it, maybe you will end up finding a way to accumulate more value as a result of approaching the work in a different way, rather than just saying, oh, I'm making 150 grand a year in this fiat job, I have to take a 50% pay cut to work in Bitcoin, it's not worth it. It's like, what are assumptions are wrapped up in that worth it, and how you're understanding that? Because I think, I don't know, it's not only just about, don't get me wrong, like, love me some sats, right? Stack as many sats as you can, but sats are just another thing that you value. And so they come up into that value system, and they're there vying for your attention, your time, and your resources. And if you have to decide, like, am I optimizing for that? Or should I be optimizing for how I wake up and feel and show up and engage every day? And to what degree will that influence, the sats value? I mean, so it's again, everyone has to make that calculation for themselves. But I think, I don't know, it seems to me that people are perhaps, again, beginning to appreciate just the value of being able to wake up every day and be engaged and be enthusiastic and engage in work that you find the most meaningful with people that you want to be around. I mean, it's almost like you can't put a price on that. So
for me, it wasn't even a choice. Like, I just understood, like, I can't focus on, I can't be
there you
productive on
go.
anything else. I can't read, like, it's just like, I couldn't, can't do this anymore. I have to do, like, Bitcoin full time. And I didn't know what I'm going to do yet, but I just decided one day I'm going to quit my job, without a plan, really. But yeah.
Do we want to dig into some of the other elements of that, or do we not want to?
Yeah, if you got time, I don't remember how much we scheduled here, but
well, I'm good if you want to discuss it.
Yeah, we can jump in. I was actually fascinated with your recent discussion with Alex Svetsky, but as well as your earlier podcast episodes. And I'm not sure who they were with, but I do recall every time that they came up with some of your guests, I was really excited to hear that there's some overlap between Bitcoin and psychedelics. And I'm still trying to figure out, and you're very eloquent about, like, the way you describe it is very eloquent, and it's much better than I've been able to kind of frame within my own thoughts. But I was thinking, like, what's the overlap? And like you mentioned, for me, like, I've had a couple, I would say, those experiences or ceremonies with what I like to call plant medicine. But and I think those helped me with my journey to leave my previous career and go into Bitcoin full time, and to actually drop everything I'm doing and go into, like, the unknown. I think that's what I'm trying to figure out, is if there's an overlap there with the way that what these substances force you to, and this can be sometimes painful to come to realize, is that maybe everything you've understood or known is wrong. Like, and there's just so much more out there, and maybe, like, whatever your understanding of afterlife was, or of God was, that is just wow. So maybe there's the overlap, or the comparison to Bitcoin could be that maybe everything we've known about money was wrong, and that these substances help us in opening our mind up to this possibility that, yeah, maybe we've been lied to all our lives. Maybe money isn't what we think it is. But I really like hearing, so I thought maybe it would be important to bring this up, because I always feel happy when I hear that there's more Bitcoiners out there that also are fascinated with that side of things. For me, I'm really interested in how they're being used more nowadays to treat depression, addiction. You know, the research coming out of John Hopkins or the MAPS organization or institute is incredible. Like when you see these results, it's you can't deny that this is a tool that can help millions of people around the world. And looking at the crisis of mental health, and these people popping pills and being prescribed these medications or drugs that makes them, I don't know, not be themselves. And the idea that you could go on one of these ceremonies or sessions with a therapist and be cured seems like almost too good to be true. But having experienced those things, like, I know it's not. So it's really interesting. I think there's a shift as well happening right now in terms of how psychedelics, the approach to them in the mainstream. I think there's more research being done now, and there's more tests being done, and I'm very optimistic in terms of how they can help people with their problems. Obviously, I do agree with what you said, or with what Alex says, that it's not for everyone, right? Like, it's not, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, and it's definitely not something to be taken lightly. Like, it's not a recreational thing. You need to approach it very seriously, and they're very powerful tools. And yeah, so the way I approached it is I just tried to learn as much as I can about them before. And I was also, like, I think I was over 30. So it was, I wasn't young. I wasn't a teen. I was always scared of, like, I was scared of my subconscious. Like, I didn't know. I was scared of what I don't know. Like, is this going to be like a nightmare? Like, maybe I just don't want to go there. But yeah, I think it was definitely, I'm one of those people that can say that it was, or maybe one, or the number of experiences helped me, or they were one of the most important experiences of my life that have changed me in a positive way. And that's not to say I've continued, because, like, it's been, I think, years since I've had my last ceremony, or whatever you'd call it. I think I'd do them again. But it's not something like a lot of people say, oh, you get addicted. It's not, sometimes you just feel like they're helpful. They're a tool. And I think more people are realizing that. I'm just really careful with recommending them to people without someone preparing for them. Like the idea of having that guide and the setting is very important. They're not, like, I actually think they're not meant to, like, how maybe a lot of people have experienced them when they were young. They would, I don't know, eat a bunch of mushrooms and then go to a concert. I actually don't think they're meant to be taken that way. I think it's something that's very personal, and it's a way to go deep within yourself. Like, there's that universe within yourself, and being around, like, being in a noisy place with a lot of people around is not ideal for that. Yeah, but I'm definitely not that experienced. I'm just fascinated with the subject. I'm fascinated with how they can help people. So yeah, when I hear, and I'm really interested with the connection, because I've actually met other Bitcoiners that are, similarly into psychedelics as well, or at least interested in them. and I'm wondering what the overlap is. And yeah, you shared within in a DM like what you think it is. And yeah, it's fascinating because like I think there is some kind of overlap where you have a lot of like you have a group of Bitcoiners that are at least open to the subject if have not experienced it themselves. And that's also one of the reasons why I thought it might be important that I come out and say, yeah,
Yeah,
they're
well,
not.
Thank you for sharing. It's interesting. You just said like you're not one to like really strongly recommend it to people, and there's so, in my opinion, there's a lot of connections between psychedelics and Bitcoin, but that's another one, right? Because they involve a high degree of responsibility, and you have to take care. And so I don't tell people to go out and do psychedelics, just like I'm not ranting and raving for people to go out and buy Bitcoin, because it's like, you can do it wrong. You can fuck up on both, and it can be disastrous. And so you really want to be careful how you promote and how you discuss them. And another thing you mentioned, you said you were kind of afraid of what was lurking around in your unconscious. And I remember a lot of people have said that to me before when I've had these discussions. And my response was always like, yeah, but like, you'd rather have something down there or in there or wherever it is that like that you think you might be afraid of, or that shouldn't be there, and you don't want to confront it. You just want to let it lurk around and like bubble up to the surface in ways you're not aware of. Like, shouldn't you want to, grab your shield and your sword and dive down in there and find out what the fuck is going on? But I think that's the default position. Like, I think most people are kind of afraid of themselves. They know there's some darkness in there, and rather than wrestling with it and gaining control of it and channeling it in the right way, it's easier to just ignore it and distract yourself from it, and hopefully it doesn't bubble up in a way that's overwhelming or overly destructive. But yeah, I mean, well, one thing I wanted to ask you before I comment on some of the other things you said was, how did it influence, because I think you said it influenced your decision to either leave your last job or start Satsback. So like, what was the mechanism there?
I don't think so. Yeah, it was definitely, I realized I need to leave the place I'm, or at least my previous job. So that was one element, and maybe it helped me get over the fear of leaving a job that was secure, and I didn't know what, or maybe getting over that fear of going into the unknown. Like, who, especially as someone that appreciates like a routine, or knowing what's next, or like predictable of a predictable life, of it would, I think without that, it would have been horrifying to just decide that I'm going to leave a job that's not making me happy without some help, right? And I'm not saying that, yeah, I actually think that was what helped me make that decision. And I don't know why they do that, but like, I've heard other people say like they decide that you're going to need to change your life, and that was maybe like the best decision I've ever made, together with starting Satsback. And I don't know if it was so when I understood that, it also they helped me understand that Bitcoin, or going full time into Bitcoin, was a good decision. And I don't know if I don't know how that happened, but it's, so those actually on one of those ayahuasca ceremonies. And like when you're I guess like few hours into it, you're walking around looking at trees, and you're looking at like generally like your environment. How people say like everything's connected and we're all like tied together with energy. You can actually see it, right? So you can see those connections. It's almost like this network of things, and it's almost like when you look at the Lightning Network, or like a blockchain visualized somewhere. And it was like, I don't know if that was the moment, but it seems a bit cliche to say like you can see connections between rocks and plants, and it's almost crazy to think, but I guess I don't know exactly what it was, but I came to understand like, okay, so this is what you got to do. Like, it's almost like I figured out my plan. Like, you got to quit your fiat job, and you got to do what you're passionate about. Um, and I don't think I would have gotten to that. Um, maybe not. Maybe I would have. I don't know, but it's definitely been helpful. Um, yeah, I don't know if I recommend ayahuasca to everyone, but
Well,
it's.
I think. Oh, by the way, I forgot you said you got to bounce it. What was it?
Oh
One.
no, no, no,
You
no.
got to bounce in like 10 minutes.
I'm actually good. No, I'm actually good for, yeah, I think I'm good for 15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that is common for people to say that. And again, there's probably many reasons, but I think at least one of them is when you confront what you confront, or if you connect with what you connect with, or if you become, however we want to characterize that energy or presence in that space, it's something of extreme value and maybe even absolute value. And when you confront that, I think it's difficult to go back into your normal life and make decisions that are way lower down the value hierarchy. Like, oh, I'm just going to do this because of the money and the materialism or the accolades. Like, I need to orient or construct my decisions closer to that type of value. And I think that's, why people come out and they make those changes. They change what their ambition is, or their career, or stuff like that. I think that's at least part of it. I also think, and this is the synergy perhaps with Bitcoin is, pre-Bitcoin, a lot of people were having these experiences, and they were still tremendously powerful and beneficial as far as I could tell. Now, if I'm being super judgmental, I could poke to a lot of, pitfalls perhaps, but I think on net they were beneficial, but still people were coming out of them and they were kind of having their minds reoriented and perhaps better integrated, but they were coming out into a world that was still so messed up and had no real structural resolution to it. And what I think is so amazing about Bitcoin is now, and maybe this is part of the overlap between the two, the two pursuits, let's say, or two interests, is that you can go and you can have these experiences, and the types of values that you expose yourself to there can now actually, or are actually, being actualized out in the world through this thing that is Bitcoin, through this phenomenon that is. So it's way easier to like come out and integrate the two. It's almost like if you are in the presence of some type of absolute value in these experiences at their height, it's almost like Bitcoin is the rails of absolute value now, for it to flow out into the world, to become the structure.
So it could be our way to integrate the things we've learned during the psychedelic journey and bring it back to the real world. And I can understand how you're saying it might be difficult, would have been difficult to do that without that, because what are you going to do? Like, okay, so I'd quit my job. What do I do next? Like, I need to make money. Like, what's the idea? And yeah, I haven't heard that one before. So
I think it allows you
fascinating.
to engage in the same set of values and principles that you encounter in their perhaps absolute or pristine form in the psychedelic experience. Now you're able to identify and engage in them in the external or interpersonal or social world. And that's what you want, right? Because it moves it from becoming just kind of an individual experience now to one that can move out from there. And the infrastructure, the architecture, the rails exist to do that with full fidelity. A message of like values and principles of that kind can now be carried and propagated out into the world through this mechanism. And so, amazing, right? Like I think, interestingly, I think that will probably improve the capacity for the psychedelic experience to be beneficial, because the world that exists outside of that experience, when you so-called come down, is now more receptive to being engaged by a mind that's oriented by those principles or values.
Maybe that was it. Yeah, maybe that was it. Like for me, like I mentioned, there was no other option. Like I couldn't continue. I needed to get involved with this like people talk about this Bitcoin gravity. Maybe the reason why I felt that was because there was that overlap between that profound experience, and the only way for me to integrate that in my own life was to get involved full time. Maybe it's also that kind of feeling of empathy that you feel during that. I guess you kind of integrate into your everyday life afterwards, because you're like, okay, so this empathy, like I can be that better. Like I feel closer to other human beings around the world, and you want the best for them. So it's almost like with Bitcoin, like what you said, it's not just about your own personal gain, but everyone else being better off. So yeah, I don't know if I would have been here in this position if it hadn't been for those experiences. But like I said, I can't recommend them to everyone. I just know that for me, they were very formative. And it seems like to other people, Stealing Fire. So that was a great book about how people use generally these flow states, but those accompanied by psychedelics to be a better version, or to perform better. But the one that blew my mind the most was the immortality key, where it turns out now that maybe these tools were being used by historically in Europe, could have been the basis for our culture and the Christian religion. And yeah, obviously, like people should listen to your podcast episode with Alex Svetsky about that, because you guys do a deep dive there on those topics. But yeah, I think it's very possible that there's a lot of these overlaps when you look at, maybe not when you look at the old churches, but have you ever looked at these old pictures of these Iranian mosques with those glass windows? And generally, like the way they're shaped is almost like it's almost like they would need to have been under the influence of something to even come up with an idea to build something as intricate and as complicated as that. Yeah, and in that book they talk about like how there's a lot of hints in the Bible and in Christianity, and I think it's very probable. I just think it's sad that we've kind of erased that from our memories or from history, if it is true, right? Like even the author says like he's not sure, but there's a lot of things pointing towards that this could have been true. So it's a fascinating subject.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to a hard question to definitively answer. But I mean, it's pretty well established that way back in our prehistory, I mean, almost all cultures had some relation to the so-called divine, and that was initially constituted by some rudimentary form of shamanism, whether a psychoactive plant was involved or not. And it stands to reason that because of that, it would form a historical basis for the more complex systems of religious thought that emerged on top of them afterwards, and they would be imbued in some capacity with that legacy. And
sorry, these traditions were geographically around the world, so these cultures weren't communicating with each other, but we've found evidence that they've been using similar techniques around the world.
And so and the hardcore religious folks kind of aren't very receptive to that argument. But like so many things, we were saying at the beginning, how when your worldview gets shaken up by anything, be it psychedelics or Bitcoin, or in this case both, I do think we're going to revisit a lot of the institutions and the formerly like unquestioned ideas or notions in our culture, and we're going to revisit them, and we're going to try to reconstitute them with a greater degree of truth. And there's all I can do is speculate, and none of my thinking in this realm is definitive right now, because how could it be? There's a lot of open questions. But I do think it's interesting that, you know, these mystical or ineffable or psychedelic experiences seem to place you in the presence of like a type of absolute value, or, you know, an absolute energy or something like that. And I think religious systems emerge for a reason. I don't think they're entirely corrupt or anything like that. I think there's a utility there, but I think in certain instances it probably cut people off from, you know, that direct experience with value. And I think there's at least if we're only looking at the corruptive and not the, you know, productive or generative aspect of those systems, there's a correlation there with, you know, financial system and what Bitcoin is helping to rectify, you know, like intermediating people's relationship with how they express value, i.e. money, and corrupting that, you know, corrupting it by being that intermediary. And now with something like Bitcoin, people are able to express value pristinely without a corruptive influence. They're able to have a more intimate relationship with value and the expression of value. And I think there's a kind of an interesting corollary there between mystical or psychedelic experiences and the tendency for the systems that get placed on top of that, perhaps well-intended to propagate the wisdom that is found within them, to become corrupted, you know, or to become used for self-serving purposes rather than for serving, you know, the purposes they were initially established for. But, you know, probably not a conversation to break into when we have 2 minutes left. So
yeah, like this is a
a
separate rabbit hole. But I really love that that I don't know, so who compared, I don't know if it was you or Alex, but it might have been probably you, saying that the idea of Jesus and how we're also like creating this new culture with Bitcoin, even without the element of psychedelics, there's still this new culture that's being created. At least it feels like it, and it's just fascinating to be a part of it. Yeah, and
we'll break into that chestnut some other time. Next time we have a chat.
For sure. I hope we get a chance to.
Yeah, it'd be great to do it in person.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Like, let me know if you're ever in Europe, or I'm gonna try to make the next Miami conference, so you're probably gonna be there. But this time I'll do better at like reaching out before. And
yeah,
you can let me know where you are.
We'll hook up for sure. We'll make it happen. Tom, I appreciate the time and the conversation today, man. Is there any sign off, shill, anything you want to mention before you bounce?
No, I think it's all good. Like, people can come visit satsback.com to check out what we're doing. There's not that many stores that we have to offer for people in the United States. It's mostly stores focused on the European markets, but check us out there.
It's not bad. I checked it out. There's quite a few.
Yeah, there's a
Europe,
bunch, but it's not like mainstream. So there's a bunch, like you'll have like international stores or like global services that you could try out, but there isn't like the mainstream stuff like the Macy's or you know, wherever.
Yeah, but like booking.com and Airbnb and all that.
Yeah. So those ones,
there, right?
those ones will be there. So check it out. Try to stack some sats. Follow us on Twitter at Satsback. Follow me on Twitter at TomCHCK. And really appreciate you having me on, John. It's been a pleasure and an honor as a longtime listener to finally be a guest. So thank you so much. And hope to do this again sometime.
Thank you, brother. Look forward to the next time we get to do it.
Perfect. Thanks
a
lot,
man.
Bye.
Take care. See ya.
Take care.